Welcome to this special edition of Hannity, the Intolerant Left. I'm Janine Pirro, and tonight for Sean. Tonight for the hour, we'll review the extreme measures Democrats, liberals, and the mainstream media will take in order to malign President Trump and everyone who supports him. But first, I want to address my recent appearance on The View to discuss my new book, Liars, Leakers, and Liberals, and the events that followed. Much has been said about what took place between me and Whoopi Goldberg, both on and off the set. Tomorrow night at 9 p.m., I will address everything that went down and set the record straight on my show, Justice. We hope you'll join us. But first, it was a busy week for President Trump and a frenzied week for everyone who hates him. Ever since President Trump took office, the left has been totally obsessed with all things Russia. But this week, following the president's meeting with Vladimir Putin, their Russia hysteria reached all new levels of crazy. Watch this.
Did the president share classified information with Putin? Did the president take other steps beyond those that he took so publicly to undermine the security of the United States?
This president is very happy making himself a client of Vladimir Putin. Who knows what they talked about behind closed doors?
In intel language and parlance, the president is acting like he is the asset for Russia.
We are in a 9/11 national emergency because our country is under attack, literally.
There seems to be no rational explanation for President Trump's behavior. And so, millions of Americans are left wondering if Putin indeed has something over the president.
Naturally, the mainstream media was even worse. Take a look at this.
This was a blatant submission to a genuine foe of our country.
Vladimir Putin has been invited to Washington. Perhaps Donald Trump will give him the keys to the city, or perhaps more importantly, the keys to some ballot boxes.
I don't think it's extreme to use that treason word. It's, adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort. I have no trepidation at all about assigning that treason word. It is no different than had somebody attacked the United States with missiles.
It's just as serious to me as the Cuban Missile Crisis in terms of an attack, or the 9/11 attack, the Pearl Harbor attack, Kristallnacht.
When do we see almost a shadow government come out and say, we cannot side with the government?
Treason, bribery, and high crimes and misdemeanors.
Treason, yeah.
Joining us now to weigh in on all of this absurd rhetoric is a counselor to the president, Kellyanne Conway. Hello, Kellyanne. As I listened to that rundown of comments, I couldn't help but think, treason is an offense for which you can receive the death penalty. Are they looking for this president to get the death penalty?
Oh, but for a media that is so precise about the language they always want to hear from everyone who works here, boy, do they just toss words into the salad bowl and mix as they want and come out with a toxic stew. It really makes no sense to me, Janine, that they are hunched over in anger at all times. They are, I think, physiologically incapable of finishing a sentence or addressing any issue without mentioning Donald Trump's name 5 or 10 times. He and I were looking at the Washington Post the other day, and he pointed out that there were 6 of the 7 articles on the front page were about him, and only because the All-Star game was in town. Or it probably would have been 7 out of 7. And so it tells you something. The obsessive outrage has been mainstreamed and regularized. And I think this is a very serious point because it's not just that the outrage and the who can out-crazy the next on cable TV has been accepted, it's now expected. You have a lot of print journalists who have contracts with these cable news stations. And so even though it has their print affiliation below their names, they're performing for the cameras and the viewers on those particular networks. I take complete offense with a smile on my face, but on behalf of those who suffered loss, grievous loss on 9/11, over 3,000 Americans gone. Kristallnacht, 2,400 plus Americans killed at Pearl Harbor. My goodness, they're comparing it to this. What do the families feel when they hear that? So it's completely over the top. And I just want to tell you something else. You and I can complain about it, but I have a slightly different view. I'm not sure it really matters. I'm not sure it matters. The president's approval ratings are far higher than the Democrats in Congress, than the mainstream media's. I don't think it matters because people curate from each and every event what they think is most important to them. What's most important to them is that this president, and the tradition of the presidents from the last 75 years, beginning with Eisenhower, met with the leader of the Kremlin. He's duty-bound to keep us out of war, and he's trying to forge a conversation on issues that affect both countries and not the rest of the world. North Korea, the Middle East, Israel, Iran, nuclear proliferation, Syria, obviously the Ukraine. So many different issues to discuss with these different heads of countries.
So we've got a president who's doing his duty, which, as you say, is to keep us out of war, and doing what every president has done for the last 75 years, which is meet with the leader of the Kremlin. And they're yelling, the sky is falling. But, when Blumenthal says, and it is a 9/11 moment, just like before 9/11. What could they possibly be talking about? Everyone is saying, what is it that these people are talking about?
First of all, it gets somebody like Senator Blumenthal on the next TV to talk more crazy. I have to say, he represents the people of Connecticut. Connecticut suffered losses on 9/11 in the towers.
Interesting.
If not on those airplanes. So how could he possibly do that and equate that to the grievous loss of life, the worst terrorist attack on American soil in our nation's history? Let's recap last week, because the media don't want to talk about it. The president started the week out at NATO, where he extracted $44 billion in contributions toward the shared defense from these countries, on the way to securing commitments for hundreds of billions of dollars more into the future. Secretary Stoltenberg of NATO thanked President Trump. On Twitter and in person, publicly, saying thank you for doing this. It's because of his leadership and his stewardship that this is happening, that other countries are keeping their commitments the way that our country has. Then he went over to the UK to reaffirm our great and historic relationship by meeting with the Queen, who I think reviewed the Guards for the first time, we're told, in about 70 years. Also with Theresa May. And then over to his meeting with Putin, which is not unlike what other presidents have done with the leader of the Kremlin at the time. I want to say one more thing. It is just stark raving mad that when the media think about Russia, all they think about is election meddling. And when they think about the Supreme Court, all they think about is abortion.
Yeah.
There are so many different issues to talk about. The president has said, yes, he believes the intelligence, Russia interfered, but Janine, it was unsuccessful interference.
Yeah,
there was no collusion.
Was changed.
It didn't. And Rod Rosenstein said that last week when he announced the indictments of the 12 Russians.
People.
He said there's no evidence that it affected a vote or swung the electoral outcome.
It is.
Why doesn't the media say that? And why did Obama and Brennan and Clapper, the last two who are cable news pundits now,
yes.
Why did they bury the intelligence that they had? They had it in the fall of 2016. I was the campaign manager at the time. They never came to me and said, we want you to see this. They buried it because they thought she would win and Trump would lose. And then all of a sudden, it became a big deal in December and January to them.
You know what? They buried it because they were part of, when they talk about meddling in the election, I think the intelligence community and the DOJ and the FBI was meddling in the election. Anyway, Kellyanne Conway, always good to get your take on all of this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Judge Janine.
All right. And joining us now with more is the author of the book, Why We Fight, Fox News national security strategist Sebastian Gorka, and former Obama economic advisor Austin Goolsbee. All right, guys. I want to, I'm not going to go over all the crazy again, because for anyone to compare the president doing what he did by meeting with the leader of the Kremlin to the Holocaust or Kristallnacht or treason or a 9/11 moment, they have to be out of their minds. But Austin, can you please tell me what they're thinking? We're all level-headed, smart people here. When Obama said, tell Vlad I'll get back to him, I'll have more flexibility, why didn't they flip out then?
Well, look, the Obama question, a lot of people said a lot of very offensive things about President Obama, as you know.
But they never said he should be charged with treason.
In this, in this case, I think normally, I agree with you, people on the left and on the right can go too far. On the question of the summit, however,
here it's not just the left. I notice you did not play the Republican statements about what President Trump's summit achieved, which were extremely critical. They called him disgraceful. The Republicans, one leading Republican official in Ohio resigned from the Republican Party. And so I don't think
he resigned from the party.
Wrong.
No, you're wrong about that. He just resigned from his position. He says he's still a Republican.
Okay. The thing I would say, Judge, is this. It's okay to sometimes, if the president does something that doesn't turn out the way he wanted it to, which I think you have to say this summit did not go as well as he wanted it to. Republicans and Democrats and independents have really kind of condemned what happened.
Okay.
I think he should just say, look, hey, it didn't go how I wanted, and I'm going to do better the next time.
How do we know how it went? Sebastian Gorka, does he have it? Does Austin Goolsbee have any information that you don't? How do we know how it went?
Judge, it's outrageous, and Kellyanne is absolutely right. The idea that a senator like Senator Blumenthal can besmirch the memory of the people who suffered in World War II, the people who suffered in the Holocaust. This is outrageous. Almost 500,000 Americans died in World War II, 3,000 on September the 11th, and this is what you're accusing the president of doing, that this is like 9/11, Kristallnacht. It's sheer lunacy.
But what is it based on, Seb? What is it based on? What did he say?
I'll tell you exactly what it's based on. I'll tell you exactly what it's based on. The fact is, everybody was in the tank for Hillary. Everybody, from Jim Comey to McCabe, everybody thought Hillary would win. Right. Congratulations. I'll be there. Look, the fact is, for 70 years, the Soviets and then the Russians have been doing this. The left couldn't care less. The media couldn't care less. They only care now because Donald Trump won the election, and they're still psychologically unable to absorb the fact that he is president. And one more thing, Judge. FDR and Truman met with Stalin dozens of times behind closed doors. We also had Kennedy meet with Khrushchev. Were any of their interpreters threatened with a subpoena by Congress? It is truly, I used to use it as a joke, it's real. It's Trump derangement syndrome.
Ooh, that is a trigger for some people. Austin, I want to end with this. Look, are you at all concerned that 20% of America's uranium is now owned by Russian interests connected to the Kremlin, and at the same time, money went into the Clinton Foundation? Now, I'm going to leave the Clinton Foundation out, okay? That payback thing. Okay. But does that bother you that Russia, with the approval of our government, has 20% of America's uranium that we use for nuclear medicine?
It might. I would have to see more details. My understanding is they're not allowed to remove it from the United States.
Yeah, but it went to Canada. It already went to Canada, and they removed it.
It doesn't make the summit a success. This was a terrible summit that went very badly, and I wish they could just put it behind them.
So you're comparing a success to our losing 20% of our uranium that can be used for a bomb, or that they use for our nuclear medicine.
It cannot be used for a bomb. You're talking about a different grade of uranium that cannot be used for a bomb.
Of course it can.
Of course it can.
Of course it can.
That's a different grade of uranium.
Yeah.
It has to be enriched.
Go ahead. All right. So, Seb, last word on the uranium. Go ahead.
Yeah, all you have to do is enrich it. I mean, that's classic whataboutism. 20% of our uranium gets taken out of the country through Canada by the Russians. Right. Oh, but Donald Trump didn't have the best press conference. I mean, you could not. That is the most obscene and actually hilarious example of whataboutism I have ever seen in my life.
It was your whataboutism. I didn't raise it. You did.
All right, guys. Thanks so much. Coming up on this special edition of Hannity, Lou Dobbs, David Avella, Doug Schoen. Stay with us.
Live from America's news headquarters, I'm Jonathan Hunt. Tragedy in Branson, Missouri, as 17 die in a duck boat accident. 9 of those killed are from the same family. 2 members of that family survived. One of them says that the captain told passengers not to bother grabbing their life jackets. The boat capsized during severe thunderstorms on Thursday night on Table Rock Lake. Authorities say 7 of the 14 survivors were hurt when the vessel went down. The captain is among the survivors. Michael Cohen secretly taped a conversation with his then client and presidential candidate Donald Trump. They discussed making a payment to Playboy model Karen McDougal, who claimed she had an affair with the president. The phone call was made 2 months before the 2016 election. The president's attorney, Rudy Giuliani, says the payment was never made. I'm Jonathan Hunt. Now back to Hannah.
Welcome back to this special edition of Hannity, the intolerant left. While the left and the mainstream media are quick to attack President Trump over meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin, they fail to see the real story of Trump's tough policies towards Russia. During an interview on CNBC, President Trump issued a stern warning to Putin if the relationship between the U.S. and Russia collapses. Watch this.
Look at the sanctions I've put on. Look at the diplomats I threw out. Look at all of the things that I've done. Nobody else did what I've done. Obama didn't do it. Obama was a patsy for Russia. He was a total patsy. Look at the statement he made where he thought the mics were turned off, okay? The stupid statement he made. Nobody does a big deal about that. Getting along with President Putin, getting along with Russia is a positive, not a negative. Right. Now, with that being said, if that doesn't work out, I'll be the worst enemy he's ever had.
But President Trump has not only issued warnings, he has a long track record of countering the malicious actions of Vladimir Putin. The president armed Ukraine, increased sanctions on Russia, increased funding to NATO, slapped severe financial restrictions on some of Vladimir Putin's closest allies, and authorized a counterattack on Putin-backed soldiers inside of Syria, killing hundreds. Remember, Russia's takeover of Crimea in the Ukraine, Putin's power grab in Syria, and the election meddling all happened on Obama's watch. Joining me now with a reaction from the Fox Business Network, Lou Dobbs. Good evening, Mr. Dobbs, and how are you this evening? Good to see you, Judge. All right. Why can't they at least recognize what is fact? If they want to make up stuff and editorialize, that's okay. But they can't recognize the facts.
They don't want to recognize the facts. The reality here is there is nothing accidental about what the left-wing media is doing, nor the desperate Dems, the Lilliputian liberals who think they can compete with this president. They have to attack like a huge pack of hyenas to have any chance against getting the attention of this president. And even then, it's not a fair fight. This president is achieving more than any president in modern political history. You mentioned some of the achievements. And Putin learned something very, very important for world peace. He learned that there is not even an ounce of backup in President Trump. He thought he was dealing there for a while with an Obama-like figure. Yeah. And as soon as he did press in Syria, hundreds of his so-called patriotic Russians who were doing his bidding in Syria were dead on the battlefield.
That's right. And you know what I find interesting? There's so much criticism of the president as it relates to his going toe-to-toe with our NATO allies because they don't want to pay their full fare. But what is amazing is Germany is now buying its energy from Russia. And while they buy it from Russia, they're saying, hey, U.S., NATO, all of you, protect us in case Russia comes after us. First of all, why is Germany buying their energy from Russia and then asking us for our money in case that we need to defend them? What's that about?
Because just as the president has said, there have been in succession 3 American presidents who have been dumb enough to permit this direction on the part of Germany. They are in effect paying blackmail to Russia. Vladimir Putin won't hit them with tactical nuclear weapons or whatever because he is getting a payment, whether it's for a pipeline, whether it is putting a chair on the board of a German chancellor on the chair of the pipeline. This is ridiculous, and it's preposterous, and not one person in American media has been talking about this but me.
You know what? I actually thought that there was a reason that maybe, and I know we're exporting energy now. The United States is starting to be this huge exporter of energy. I said, well, maybe the prices. No, it's blackmail.
It's outright blackmail, and Merkel has paid it. By the way, each German leader has been paying it. All of Europe is dependent upon Russia in one form or another, some small, some large percentages of their energy. And each one of the European nations is dependent on Russia for energy. And that's exactly what Putin wants. It's what's working. And what was it that President Trump, in that summit in Helsinki, attacked and suggested that Merkel do? And that is back the heck out of that pipeline and start buying your energy from your friends.
Okay, so the United States is getting stronger as it relates to the exporting of energy, correct?
Absolutely. We are a net exporter for the first time of petroleum products. This is remarkable, the success of, and to be very clear, it didn't start under Obama. It started under Trump. And the full push for petroleum exports is remarkable. We are right now the largest oil producer in the world.
In the world.
And that may change because the president has also convinced Saudi Arabia to help with lowering prices by raising production so they may be competitive with us once again.
Well, you know what? But the good news is if we at some point can rely on our own energy, that's a good thing.
It's a wonderful thing, and it's a part of the deal. We have North America is replete with petroleum reserves.
Absolutely.
This is the richest area in the world when it comes to natural resources.
And we don't have to rely on the other guys anymore.
We really do not.
Lou Dobbs, always good to have you on Hannity. And earlier today, President Trump tweeted, I got severely criticized by the fake news media for being too nice to President Putin. In the old days, they would call it diplomacy. If I was loud and vicious, I would have been criticized for being too tough. Remember when they said I was too tough with Chairman Kim? Hypocrites. Joining me now is former Clinton pollster and Fox News contributor Doug Schoen and GOPAC chairman David Avella. All right, Doug, let's start with you.
Sure.
All right. So the president gets out there. He does what every leader has done, and that is every president has done, meet with the leader of the Kremlin. And now it's treason, which requires death penalty sentence. It's the Holocaust, Kristallnacht, 9/11, and, the sky's falling. Sure. What do you think?
Well, I don't think it's Kristallnacht, 9/11. It certainly isn't treason. But I would say as a principled hawk on foreign policy, I think the president was too accommodating. I'd like to know, Judge, why? Because I think he did not affirm for the world media that the Russians had meddled. There was no discussion of our values, that we stand for freedom and liberty, and they are an oppressive, authoritarian regime, that there was no discussion of the counterterrorism agreements that may or may not have been reached, or most importantly, you haven't talked about tonight, cybersecurity. Our intelligence views them as the most aggressive and malevolent force in the world, and we need to know before the next summit where we stand, what we're going to do, and that we stand with our NATO allies foursquare, completely in defense of our values.
David Avella. All right. So what Doug is saying is that, he didn't reiterate, and I'm going to say that word, that he believed in meddling. It was meddling. And could you understand why the president would be somewhat soft in terms of, and I don't want to use the word soft, why the president hesitates to totally support the intelligence community, given the fake investigation that was based on a dossier purchased by Hillary Clinton?
Doug's answer there sounds like he's auditioning to be Bernie Sanders' press secretary for his presidential bid
I'm a
in
Scoop
2020.
Jackson Democrat. I'm a hawk. I am not with Bernie Sanders. I believe we assert our values. We stand up to Russia everywhere. That's the opposite of Bernie Sanders, David.
Here is the best way for the president to position us to be in a position of strength against Russia, and that is to keep the American economy going strong. The way we have all the funds to do all the things Doug talked about is a government with resources. The best way for government to get resources is American workers being at full capacity, making sure government has the resources it needs, and making sure nations around the world want to be working in our markets, buying our products. Okay. And when we have a strong economy, it's the best way to deal with Russia. Okay. So what the president has done, and to get us our economy where it is today, he needs to keep doing. That's how we deal with Russia.
But you know, Doug, when you talk about being a hawk, and what David is talking about is so incredibly important, and that is economic strength. Because people who are in business together rarely go to war with each other. But you say that you're a hawk. You know, when Putin annexed Crimea and, you know, with this overthrow or attempted in Ukraine, Obama didn't do anything. I mean, President Trump is. We're sending billions to Ukraine in terms of arms and munitions.
Well, let me be very clear, and I have worked in Ukraine and was acutely aware of what Putin did, and I think it was outrageous, and I think what Obama did was outrageous. I approach this as a patriot and an American, not a partisan. We need to do more to stand up to the Russians, whether it be in Ukraine, in Georgia, in Syria. We need to stand with our NATO allies.
Hold on. We're killing them in Syria. We're arming them in Ukraine. We sanction them because of Crimea. I mean, come on. Let's not make like this is he's not doing anything.
I didn't say that. I said there's more to be done. 20% of the overall landmass of Ukraine is held by the Russians, whether it be Crimea or eastern Ukraine. Putin is talking about a phony referendum again in Ukraine. Yeah. We got to say no to that and strengthen the Ukrainian government, indeed our allies around the world.
All right. David Avella and Doug Schoen, thanks so much. Thanks. And coming up, Alan Dershowitz, Sarah Carter, and Tom Fitton weigh in on the left's obsession with treason. Don't go away. Welcome back to this special edition of Hannity. It's the end of the world as we know it. At least that's what the left and the mainstream media want you to think. Some compared Trump's meeting with Putin to the Holocaust, Pearl Harbor, and 9/11. But the favorite new talking point from some liberals, never-Trumpers, and their friends in the media is that President Trump has committed treason. Take a look.
I want to read the definition of treason.
This was nothing short of treasonous. We're hearing a new word, right? He said it was treason, right?
The words like, you know, treason and undermining, our Republican little case R rule of government are being used now.
We have a treasonous president.
The very fact that reasonable people can disagree on whether or not we're talking about treason or high crimes and misdemeanors or what have you, I find genuinely shocking and seriously nauseating.
Joining us now with legal analysis of these absurd claims is the author of the book, The Case Against Impeaching Trump, Harvard Law professor Alan Dershowitz, Fox News contributor Sarah Carter, Judicial Watch president Tom Fitton. All right, Professor Dershowitz, I'll go to you first. What is treason?
Treason is the only crime defined specifically in the Constitution. It shall consist only in levying war against the United States or in adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort. Obviously, it's wartime. It's what Aaron Burr was accused of doing. It's what people who became Nazis and supported the Nazis and joined the Nazi regime were accused of doing. It's not what President Trump did, nor is it what President Franklin Delano Roosevelt did when he went to Yalta and sat down with Stalin and allowed him to control all of Eastern Europe. Many Americans on the right were calling that treasonous or treason, but you can't just throw that term around. It's the only crime specifically defined in the Constitution. I want to make one more point. Sure. To compare what President Trump did to the Holocaust or to Kristallnacht is a form of Holocaust denial. because what it suggests is that nothing more happened to the Jews than is happening today in America. It suggests there were no gas chambers, there were no killing fields, there was no plan to kill 6 million Jews. It's a disgraceful comparison.
Well,
and it just demeans the suffering that so many people went through during the Second World War.
Professor, without a doubt, the pain of the Holocaust is still rippling through our society and the world as well it should.
Of course.
But Sarah Carter, I'll go to you. They also likened it to 9/11. 3,000 Americans were attacked on 9/11 and killed. What do these Democrats and the mainstream media, do they like laugh in a corner, or do they believe this?
You know, what's so frightening, Judge Janine, is that I actually think they believe this. And at first it would seem laughable. I was thinking the first time I heard that, I thought, oh, is this a joke? Is this the crazy uncle in the corner? And then I kept hearing it over and over and over again. I mean, CNN dedicated nearly 8 hours to calling the president treasonous. It is punishable by death. Think about that. This is disinformation. This is a campaign against an administration that is so volatile and so dangerous. Look, if they're worried about Russia, they should be worried about themselves more, because the disinformation campaign that is coming across on the media and from the rhinos and from the Democrats is far more dangerous than what happened with Russia.
Well, clearly, I mean, it is a hate campaign, Tom Fitton. And, you know, a year ago, you would ask for freedom of information on certain documents. Department of Justice comes back and says, no, 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 no. So in February of this year, you actually file a lawsuit. I mean, you know, you follow through with this.
Right.
And now you're getting information, I believe, on the minimally corroborated dossier that we knew was a fake. And I believe that we're now finding out that that dossier was an essential part of the FBI's application for the warrant.
Well, this is a big deal in the sense the FBI supposedly is going to give us, I would presume, redacted materials about the FISA application, which this DNC Clinton dossier was used to support. So we're going to get these FISA application warrants, or at least versions of them, that have been denied to the American people thus far. And it's been a year. The cover-up's beginning to end, and we'll see just how far the deep state's willing to go in terms of showing exactly the abuses it engaged in to target Trump. Remember, the allegation by Devin Nunes' intelligence committee was that there would be no FISA warrants, there'd be no spying on the Trump team, but for Hillary Clinton's dossier that was laundered into the DOJ and FBI through Bruce Orr, through the State Department, Sidney Blumenthal, you name it. So this could be a big deal. Well, we don't know. We were supposed to get the documents today. We haven't even gotten them yet.
Right. I saw that you were supposed to get it today. But everything that you've been doing, Tom Fitton, has been a big deal by getting information that Congress can't get. But I'm going to go to you, Professor Dershowitz. Now, let's assume that Tom Fitton ends up getting information that proves that the dossier was totally an essential part of the warrant, and that we know that Hillary Clinton paid for it. Where do we go from there legally? What happens?
Well, there's a case called Franks versus Maryland, which says that if a warrant, it didn't deal with a national security warrant, it's even worse if it's a national security warrant, because that's done ex parte, and the court is supposed to be able to trust the people who are bringing it to them. But if it's based on misinformation or failure to provide essential information, the entire warrant can be thrown out, and then you get to the issue of fruit of the poisonous tree. And it's just not clear what it would do to the ongoing investigation. You know, in my book, The Case Against Impeaching Trump, I follow through this whole analysis of what would happen if, in the event, we had a situation like that. And we have to get back to the point of treason as well. You know, treason is an impeachable offense. Yes, it's punishable by death. But the only people who commit treason and the only people who are subject to impeachment are people who actually join forces militarily with our enemies and help them during time of war. People like Ezra Pound, people like the woman who broadcast to Americans, people who Benedict Arnold. But treason is not something that can be used against the president. They used to do that in England, but they don't do it in America.
Sarah Carter, what are your sources telling you about the information that may be released to Tom Fitton?
Well, once this information comes out, I have been told by numerous sources that the answers will be revealed, and it's going to be explosive. And this is the reason why, Judge Janine, the House Intelligence Committee and the other committees want the release of those documents. They don't want to allow the DOJ to continue hiding this from the American public.
And Tom Fitton, just a few seconds. You know, Congress wants it. They don't want DOJ to hide it, as Sarah Carter just said, but you're the only guy getting it. So my hat's off to you, but I'm not wearing it.
Well, you know, you got to go to court. Congress doesn't go to court. Come on, Congress, join us.
All right. Professor Alan Dershowitz, Sarah Carter, Tom Fitton, thanks so much for being with us. And still to come, Florida AG Pam Bondi and Tammy Bruce. They're going to weigh in on how the left is targeting pro-Trump supporters all over the country. That and more as this special edition of Hannity continues.
Live from America's news headquarters, I'm Jonathan Hunt. New details tonight about preliminary plans for President Trump's military parade. At least 5,000 service members may march in the parade. It's also expected to feature old and new aircraft, ground vehicles, and horses. But no tanks will be featured. About 50 Pentagon staffers are reportedly planning the event. It's expected to cost at least $12 million. The parade is scheduled to take place November 10th. The FDA issued a warning today about a synthetic marijuana laced with rat poison. It's also known as spice or K2 and has sickened hundreds in 10 states and killed several others. Washington, D.C. is the latest city to issue a warning. More than 200 cases of people becoming ill have been linked to the drug since Saturday. I'm Jonathan Hunt. Now back to Hannity.
Welcome back to this special edition of Hannity, the Intolerant Left. Yesterday, anti-Trump protesters gathered outside of Democratic Congresswoman Maxine Waters' Los Angeles office, where they burned and stomped on an American flag while chanting, "America was never great." They had gathered because a far-right group had also planned a protest at the same location. Also in Los Angeles, protesters tried to shut down the grand opening of a coffee shop because the owner is supposedly pro-Trump. The owner's daughter said it was very scary. There was a lot of people protesting outside wearing masks, and they threw a significant amount of feces at our windows. It's becoming more common for Republicans, including members of the Trump administration, to be harassed in public. Here are just some of the examples.
I was asked to leave a restaurant this weekend where I attempted to have dinner with my family. My husband and I politely left and went home. I was asked to leave because I work for President Trump.
3 huge guys came up and started probably an inch from my face, screaming at me every word in the book, cursing as loud as they could.
Homeland Security Secretary Kirsten Nielsen is in a Mexican restaurant of all places. Gold! Shame on you! Shame! Shame! Shame!
Why are you separating families? Why did you leave my husband alone? I'm not trying to disrespect you, but why are you separating families?
He's not.
I'm not trying to disrespect you. I'm not trying to disrespect you.
Joining me now is Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi and Fox News contributor Tammy Bruce. All right, good evening to both of you.
Hi there.
You know, Pam, I have to tell you, when I hear about people burning the American flag and chanting F America and all of the other stuff that we can't possibly say, it's stunning to me, but the First Amendment protects all this.
That's right. It does protect that, and, you know, we fought for this country to have the First Amendment right to do that. But let me say, shame on Maxine Waters. These were her supporters, and she's out there representing, allegedly, the United States of America. She should have come out and condemned them burning our flag right away. Her supporters said they weren't there to incite hate or violence, yet they have pipes and bats. Really? I mean, she should be ashamed of herself because she has not come out and condemned this. And Janine, you and I have been saying this for a long time. She can stop this, but she won't. She keeps doubling down and making it worse.
Okay, and so, Tammy, I mean, what Pam says is true. She could have said something about it.
Sure.
But this is the very same person who's saying, when you see these people in public, push back, get a crowd. What's going to happen when, you know, something crazy happens? I understand that people were there with bats and pipes.
We want this to stop before someone's killed.
or seriously injured. We've seen where there's protests where someone ends up getting killed. We've all rejected that. The problem is indeed that this has been the permission slip that Maxine Waters gave the people who are on the edge. The good news is it's not everyone, right? These events make the news. It is a select, smaller group of people. We should not presume that this is, all of America. I'm begun to question whether or not we're as divided even as we're told we are. So in the midst of something like this, things can be done. Yes, Maxine Waters should have said, oh my gosh, I was wrong. Clearly this is now ballooning into something else.
She was forced to say that.
But you know who else has not said anything after something like this? Is Paul Ryan, is Mitch McConnell, other Republican leadership that could say, clearly Representative Waters is not saying anything, but they've got the power to take action against her internally in Congress, but also...
What kind of power would they take?
Well, I think that
you
can limit someone's position on committees. You can limit the engagement that they can have in Congress. You can embarrass them with a rebuke and a censure. None of those things have occurred, and they
I got to tell you, Pam, it seems like in Congress, what Tammy is saying is a great idea, but one hand washes the other. Like all of a sudden we find out that there's a slush fund for sexual harassment. They all knew about it, and they're like shocked. There's gambling in Casablanca. Mm-hmm. I mean, it is the left and the right, one hand washing the other. What can we do about this?
Well, this isn't the America that we grew up in, is it? Nor is it the America we want to live in. And she needs to, on her own, condemn this. She needs to stop what she's been saying. I know Tammy's right. You and I have been saying this, Janine. Someone is going to get hurt. And really, I'm so glad the other side of protesters didn't show up that day. Yep. Yet her supporters still did, armed with pipes and bats, yet they weren't there for fear or hate. Really?
One of the things, Tammy, that concerns me is that when we have issues like we had in, let's say, with Antifa, when they jump into their ninja outfits, and then there's a stand down by police, as we saw in Berkeley with the arson and the fires and the damaging property. The stand down by police, what can we do about that?
Well, I think the public conversation is important. We've got to shame that kind of behavior. We've got to point it out. We've got to make sure people know what cities are doing what. And there needs to be a public shaming. But also, may I suggest, and I'm not a big fan of hate crimes. Crime is a crime. But you've got action here where, yes, you've got the First Amendment when it comes to expressing your opinion. That does not include protection for violence or vandalism or terroristic threats or anything like that. What if, in fact, there were serious repercussions to that kind of action? We know that the charges were dropped on all of the rioters at the Trump inauguration, the Antifa and others. Perhaps it's about adding that kind of action as an additional hate crime. If you attack people because of their political beliefs, yell and speak all you want. Physical violence and terrorism, that kind of dynamic, we've got to address.
Pam, you're the Attorney General. Now, when the police stand down, what power do we have, and we have 30 seconds, what power do we have to force them to act?
Well, it's very difficult because, again, it's free speech, and that's what these people want. They want the police to attack them. They want to be arrested. That's what they want. They want to be dragged out in handcuffs. The only crime that I saw based on in front of Maxine Waters' office was the theft of that flag. And that's a petty theft, Tammy, but it is a crime, and it is showing that people will be held accountable. But it's a bigger picture than this. These people have just got to stop it.
We have to deal with coming up more of this special edition of Hannity right after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back to this special edition of Hannity. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have left this evening. Be sure to pick up a copy of my new book, Liars, Leakers, and Liberals. And don't forget to tune into Justice tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Eastern. Governor Mike Huckabee will join me, and I'll talk all about my recent appearance on The View to promote my book, Liars, Leakers, and Liberals. I hope you'll join us. Sean is back on Monday. Have a great weekend. Jason Chaffetz is up next, filling in for Laura Ingram.